The boy
She
stood at
kept
the
saying
clubhouse
Daddy's
door
angels.
with a toddler in his arms,
I just followed her.
soaked through and shaking so hard his teeth made sounds. For 6 miles, he'd walked through 27-degree sleet without a jacket, because he'd given his to the little girl. And for 3 weeks before that, he'd been counting steps on wet pavement because he had no home left to count toward. What the bikers found when they opened the door would change everything, because the child he was holding wasn't a stranger. And the numbers he'd memorized 3 weeks ago in a parking garage, the ones he'd repeated every night like a prayer he didn't understand, were about to unlock 15 years of questions one man had been trying to answer since 2009.
Easy now, son, we've got you.
This is Emmett and Luther's story. And the part about the Hell's Angels? That comes in at word 17. Right now. If you believe that the scariest-looking people in a room are sometimes exactly who you need, subscribe to Gentle Biker Official. Comment where you're watching from, because what happens next will prove that sometimes a 2-year-old knows more about where angels live than any adult ever could. She kept saying, "Daddy's angels." I just followed her. That's what Emmett Holloway said before his knees went and the world turned sideways. The door had opened 11 seconds earlier. A man the size of a refrigerator stood there. Leather vest, full beard, arms covered in ink that disappeared into the dim light behind him. His name was Spector, 51 years old, ex-McDowell County detective. 19 years on the force before the department buried a child welfare complaint he'd escalated. And he'd walked out the same day wearing the patch he still wore now. He looked at the boy. Then at the bundle pressed against the boy's chest, a toddler, maybe 2 years old, wrapped in an oversized leather vest and a gray hoodie that was translucent with cold. Spector's expression didn't change, but his body did. He stepped forward, one arm out, the other hand already reaching back toward the room behind him. "Diesel," he said. One word, no volume. It carried anyway. Then he caught Emmett's weight before the boy hit the concrete. The toddler didn't make a sound. She was awake, her eyes open, dark and steady in a way that didn't match her age. When Spector's hand went to her shoulder to check her breathing, she looked at him. Not scared. Just watching. Emmett's lips moved. The words came out slow, slurred at the edges from the cold. She kept saying, "Daddy's angels." I just followed her. Then his eyes rolled back, and Spector was lowering him to the floor, calling again, louder this time, and the room behind him filled with movement. Boots on wood, voices layered and controlled. Someone killed the music. Someone else was already pulling blankets from a back room. A man in his late 40s, broad shoulders, medic bag already in one hand, dropped to his knees next to Emmett without a word. That was Diesel, combat medic. 2 tours Iraq, worked as an EMT on the side, and kept his certification current because he'd seen what happened when help arrived 3 minutes too late. His hands went to Emmett's neck first. Pulse check. Then the boy's left hand, still curled around the toddler, even unconscious. "Jesus," Diesel said quietly. The fingers were white. 3 of them, index, middle, ring, showing the early stages of frostbite. The hand that had gripped a 26-pound child through 6 miles of freezing rain without gloves. Spector was already lifting the toddler free, carefully. One arm under her legs, the other supporting her back. She let him. Didn't fight. Didn't cry. Just kept those steady eyes on the boy on the floor, as if she needed to make sure he was still there. "Core temp's low," Diesel said, fingers at Emmett's wrist now, eyes on his watch. 91.4, maybe lower. He's hypothermic. We've got maybe 40 minutes on the hand before this gets permanent. What about her? Spector's voice was quiet. The toddler was light, too light for 2 years old, but she was breathing steady. No visible injury. The vest she was wrapped in was enormous on her, leather sleeves hanging past her hands, but it was dry on the inside. The boy had kept her dry. Diesel reached over, 2 fingers to the toddler's wrist, eyes still on his watch. 10 seconds. Then he looked up at Spectre. She's fine. Warm enough. No respiratory distress. He kept her warm. He gave her his jacket, someone said from the doorway. They all looked. The boy was wearing a gray hoodie, soaked, threadbare, drawstring replaced with a knotted shoelace. No coat. Work boots 2 sizes too large with the soles separated at the front, flapping open, packed with ice, for 6 miles, in 27 degrees, carrying a toddler. Get him warm, Spectre said. Blankets, not heat. Slow rewarming. I'll call... Wait. That was Sandstone. 43. Former middle school counselor. Left education after reporting a suspected abuse case that the school board had declined to act on. He'd been standing near the back of the room. Now he was moving forward, eyes on the toddler in Spectre's arms. Let me see her. Spectre turned. Sandstone leaned in, studying the toddler's face. Then the vest. Then he reached into the vest's breast pocket, carefully, slowly, like he was handling evidence, and pulled out a small rectangle of cardboard. It was a birthday card. Cheap drugstore kind. Wet, nearly destroyed, ink bleeding across the surface in blue rivers. But 2 things were still readable. The words Daddy's Angels in the center, shaky toddler handwriting, and the name in the return address corner. Burnham. Sandstone looked up. His face had gone very still. This is Lily Burnham. The room changed. Not loud, just sharper. Every man in that space straightened without moving. Diesel's hands paused for half a second over Emmett's chest before resuming. Spectre's jaw tightened. Luther's Lily? Luther's Lily? Nobody spoke for 3 seconds. The refrigerator hummed in the corner. Sleet hit the windows in waves. Then Spectre said very quietly, Where the hell is Luther? Hospital. Collapsed at the ER entrance tonight around 9:50. They're holding him for observation. Low blood pressure. Possible cardiac event. He texted an hour ago. Said he's fine. They're just being cautious. Call him, Spectre said. Now. Sandstone already had his phone out. Diesel was wrapping Emmett's left hand, the frostbitten one, in a thermal blanket, elevating it slightly, keeping the fingers visible. The boy's breathing was shallow but steady. His lips were moving again. No sound. Just the shape of words forming and reforming. Spectre looked down at Lily. She was still watching Emmett. Still hadn't made a sound. Her small hand reached out once toward the boy on the floor, then pulled back and curled into Spectre's vest. You're okay, sweetheart, Spectre said. Soft voice. The kind you use when you don't want to scare something small. You're safe now. Your dad's on his way. She looked at him, blinked once, then back to Emmett. The phone was ringing. Sandstone had it on speaker. 2 rings. 3. Then a click. Yeah? Luther's voice, rough, tired. Background hospital noise, beeping monitors, someone's shoes squeaking on linoleum. Luther, it's Sandstone, don't panic, but where's Lily? The question came fast. Too fast. The kind of speed that meant he'd been waiting for bad news. She's here. At the clubhouse. She's safe. Silence. 5 seconds of it. Then, what do you mean she's there? A boy brought her. Walked 6 miles through the storm. Collapsed at our door about 4 minutes ago. He's hypothermic. Diesel's got him. But Luther, he had Lily wrapped in your vest. and there was a birthday card in the pocket. Another pause. Shorter this time. Is she hurt? No, she's fine. Warm, no injuries. He kept her safe the whole way. Who is he? Don't know yet. 15, maybe 16. Homeless by the look of him. 3 weeks on the street, I'd guess. Split lip, bruising, road rash. But he got her here. Luther's breathing changed on the other end. Faster. Shallower. I'm on my way. They releasing you? They will. The line went dead. Spectre looked at Diesel. How long? Hospital's 4 miles. If he walks out right now and drives like Luther drives, 12 minutes. We've got 12 minutes to get this boy stable enough to talk. Diesel nodded once. His hands moved faster. Emmett's eyes opened. Not all the way. Just slits. Brown eyes trying to focus on a ceiling that wouldn't hold still. Easy, Diesel said. Low voice, steady. You're inside. You're safe. Don't try to move yet. Emmett's head turned anyway. Searching. His lips shaped a word. Lily. She's right here, Spectre said. He crouched down, bringing Lily into Emmett's line of sight. See? She's okay. You did it. Emmett stared at her for a long moment. His chest rose and fell twice. Then his eyes closed again. Stay with me, Diesel said. I need you awake for a few more minutes. Can you do that? Emmett's eyes opened again. Slower this time. Where am I? Hell's Angels Clubhouse, end of Coalfield Road. You walked here. 6 miles, Emmett said. Quiet. Factual. Like he was reading it off a list. In a storm, Diesel added. Carrying a 2-year-old, that was a hell of a thing you did. Emmett's gaze drifted back to Lily. She was still watching him. Her small hand uncurled from Spectre's vest and reached toward him again. This time she didn't pull back. Daddy's angels, she said. 3 syllables. Clear as glass. Emmett's mouth moved into something that might have been a smile if his face had more energy left in it. She kept saying that, he whispered, the whole way. I didn't know what it meant, but when I saw the light, when I saw the vests through the window, I thought maybe... He trailed off. His eyes were closing again. Maybe what? Diesel prompted gently. Maybe she knew something I didn't. Spectre and Diesel exchanged a look. How do you know Lily? Spectre asked. I don't. Then how? I found her. The room got quieter. Found her where? Sandstone's voice now. He'd moved closer, phone still in hand, recorder app open. Emmett's eyes stayed closed this time, but his mouth kept moving. Hospital. Emergency entrance. I was sheltering there. From the storm. Man came out. Collapsed on the steps. Lily was with him. He wasn't moving. I tried to help. But he just told me to take her. Said, find the angels. She knows where. Then he passed out. Ambulance came. They took him inside. I tried to follow, but they wouldn't let me in. Security said I couldn't stay, so I picked her up. And she kept pointing, kept saying Daddy's angels. So I walked. What did the man look like? Spectre's voice was very careful now. Big guy, 50s maybe, vest like yours, scar on his face, left side, ear to jaw. Nobody spoke. Diesel's hands had stopped moving. Spectre was staring at Emmett like he'd just spoken a language nobody should know. Because that description matched Luther Burnham exactly. The scar, the age, the vest. Luther had collapsed at the hospital tonight. Around 9:50. Exactly when Emmett said. Luther had been with Lily when it happened. And Luther had sent this boy, a homeless stranger, to bring his daughter to the only place he knew she'd be safe, to the brothers, to the angels. Jesus, Sandstone said quietly. Spectre stood slowly, still holding Lily. His eyes hadn't left Emmett's face. What's your name? Emmett. Emmett Holloway. Emmett, I need you to stay awake a little longer. Can you do that for me? Emmett's eyes opened. Just slits again. Why? Because the man who sent you here? That's Lily's father. And he's on his way. He's going to want to meet the person who walked 6 miles through hell to bring his daughter home. Emmett's expression didn't change. He just nodded once. Small movement, like he'd expected something like this. Okay. Okay, Spectre echoed. He looked at Diesel. How's the hand? Rewarming, slow and steady. Fingers are pinking up. If we keep this pace, he'll be fine. No permanent damage. Good. Spectre shifted Lily slightly in his arms. She was getting heavy. Or maybe he was just getting old. Sandstone, get a blanket for her, and some water for him when he's ready. On it. The front door opened. Cold air rushed in. Then Luther. He didn't walk. He moved. Fast and controlled and barely breathing. Hospital wristband still on. Discharge papers crumpled in one hand. Eyes locked on Spectre. Then on Lily. His face did something complicated. Relief and rage and something older than both. He crossed the room in 4 strides. Spectre handed Lily over without a word. Luther took her. Held her. One large hand cradling her head, the other wrapped around her small body like he could shield her from the entire world if he just held tight enough. His eyes closed. His forehead pressed against the top of her head. He didn't say anything. Nobody expected him to. Then Lily's small voice, muffled against his chest. Daddy, angels came. Luther's shoulders shook. Once. Just once. Then he was still again. He pulled back enough to look at her, checked her face, her hands, her breathing, professional and thorough and shaking slightly at the edges. You okay, baby girl? Uh-huh. You cold? No. Boy gave me jacket. Luther's eyes lifted, found Emmett on the floor, took in the wet hoodie, the frost-bitten hand wrapped in thermal blankets, the boots with the separated soles. He stared for a long time. Then he looked at Spectre. He brought her. 6 miles, in the storm, after you collapsed at the hospital. Luther's jaw worked. He looked back at Emmett. The boy's eyes were open now, watching. Steady despite the exhaustion. You heard me, Luther said. Not a question. You said find the angels. She knew where. And you just walked. She was scared. I couldn't leave her there. Luther knelt, slowly, Lily still in his arms. He got down to Emmett's level. Stayed there. What's your name? Emmett Holloway. Emmett, you know who I am? The man from the hospital. Lily's dad. That's right. Luther's voice was very quiet, very controlled. You know what you did tonight? Emmett's eyes flicked to Lily, then back. I just walked. You walked 6 miles through freezing rain without a jacket. You're hypothermic. You've got frostbite. You almost died. For a kid you didn't know. She kept saying your name, Emmett said. The whole way. Daddy. Daddy's angels. Like she knew. I don't know how she knew, but I believed her. Luther didn't move for 5 full seconds. Then he reached out with the hand that wasn't holding Lily and placed it on Emmett's shoulder. Firm. Steady. The kind of touch that meant something specific in the Brotherhood. You brought my daughter home safe. You hear me? Safe. That means something to me. That means something to everyone in this room. Emmett just nodded. His eyes were closing again. Let him rest, Diesel said. We need to keep him warm and monitor the hand. He's stable, but he needs sleep. Luther stood. He looked at Spectre. Where'd he come from? Don't know yet. 3 weeks on the street by the look of him. Split lip, bruising, eviction, I'd guess. The kind where you don't have anywhere left to go. Luther's expression went very still. How old? 15, 16. Same age as... Luther stopped. Didn't finish. Didn't need to. Everyone in that room knew what he was thinking. Same age as Reese would be now. The daughter he'd lost in 2009. The daughter whose custody file had closed while he was still fighting to get stable enough to bring her home. The system had failed him once. It had just tried to fail this boy the same way. And somehow, through a storm and a collapse and a 2-year-old's faith, that boy had ended up here. At this door. Holding Luther's second chance. We need to know his story, Luther said. Voice steady again. Presidential. Soon as he's awake, full story. Where he's been. Who failed him. How he ended up on the street. We'll get it, Spectre said. Good. Luther looked down at Lily. She was falling asleep now, head against his chest, small hand curled in his vest. The birthday card was still visible in the breast pocket. Daddy's angels. The ink still bleeding. He looked at the card for a long moment. Then he looked at Emmett, unconscious now, breathing steady, Diesel adjusting the thermal blankets around him with the kind of precision that came from saving lives in worse conditions than this. He doesn't go back to the street, Luther said. Not loud. But everyone heard it. Not tonight. Not while I'm president of this chapter. Spectre nodded once. Understood. When he wakes up, I'll talk to him. Find out what happened. Who did this? And then, Luther paused. His hand tightened slightly on Lily's back. And then we're going to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. You think there's more? There's always more, Luther said quietly. You know that. Spectre did know that. They all did. That's why they were here. Emmett woke at 2:17 a.m. The clubhouse was quiet. Low lights. Most of the brothers had gone home. Just 4 still there. Diesel, Sandstone, a younger guy in his late 20s named Rimshot, who was documenting something on a laptop, and Luther. Luther was in a chair next to the cot. Same position he'd been in for the last 3 hours. Lily asleep on a separate cot 6 feet away, blankets piled high, breathing soft and even. Emmett opened his eyes slowly. The ceiling came into focus. Wood beams. A ceiling fan that wasn't moving. Then Luther's face. Hey, Luther said. Quiet. Hey, Emmett echoed. His voice was rough. How you feeling? Warm? Good, that's good. Luther leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. You remember what happened? Most of it. Hospital. Storm. Walked here. Your daughter. My daughter. Luther looked over at Lily, watched her for a moment, then back to Emmett. She's safe because of you. You understand that? I just did what anyone would. No. Luther's voice was firm, not angry, just absolute. No, you didn't. Most people would have called someone, or walked away, or convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. You picked her up and walked 6 miles in the worst storm we've had all year. That's not what anyone would do. That's what you did. And I need you to understand that that matters. Emmett stared at him, then down at his left hand, still wrapped. The fingers felt strange, tingly, tight, like they belonged to someone else. "Will it be okay?" he asked. "Diesel says yeah. No permanent damage if we keep you warm and rested for the next 48 hours. You got lucky." Emmett nodded, looked away. "I don't feel lucky." "Yeah," Luther said quietly. "I know that feeling." They sat in silence for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the storm had stopped. Just wind now. "Emmett," Luther said, "I need to know what happened to you, where you've been, how you ended up at that hospital tonight." Emmett's shoulders pulled in slightly. Defensive posture. The kind you develop when every authority figure in your life has asked questions that turned into more problems. Luther saw it, recognized it. He'd seen it before, in his own mirror, 15 years ago. "I'm not a cop," Luther said. "I'm not CPS. I'm not going to call anyone you don't want me to call. But I can't help you if I don't know what I'm helping with. And right now, that's what I want to do. Help." Emmett looked at him for a long time, searching for the lie, the angle, the reason this was going to turn bad like everything else. He didn't find it, so he started talking. 3 weeks ago, they evicted us. Me and my mom. We'd been on the county housing wait list for 14 months. 2 weeks before our number was supposed to come up, something changed. Administrative correction, they called it. We got bumped back 200 slots. Landlord wanted us out for a demolition agreement with some developer. Mom got sick during the eviction. County put her in a medical facility. They told me to go to the youth shelter. "Did you?" "For 4 days. Then I left." "Why?" "Because staying there felt like disappearing. Like if I stayed long enough, I'd stop being a person and just become a file. So I left. Figured I'd find work. Find a place. Get Mom out when she was better. But nobody hires a kid with no address, and nobody rents to a kid with no job. So, I just walked. 3 weeks. Sleeping where I could. Eating when I could. Trying to stay invisible. What about family? Mom's sister in Charleston, but she didn't know about the eviction until it was done. By the time she found out, I was already gone. Didn't want to drag her into it." Luther's expression hadn't changed, but his hands had tightened slightly where they were clasped. "You said administrative correction. Who signed off on that?" "County Commissioner's office. Guy named Preston Aldridge." Luther went very still. Very, very still. His face didn't move. His breathing didn't change. But something behind his eyes shifted. Something old and cold and patient. "Say that name again." "Preston Aldridge, County Commissioner. He's been there for years. Everyone says he's a good guy, community leader, Meals on Wheels driver, builds houses for Habitat for Humanity." "Yeah," Luther said quietly. "I know who he is." Emmett frowned. "You know him?" "I know his name." Luther's voice had gone flat, controlled, the kind of control that took effort. "Keep talking. What happened after the wait list changed?" "I went to the county office, tried to appeal. They said there was no appeal process for administrative corrections. Caseworker wouldn't look at me. Mom's church tried calling the commissioner's office. Got a form letter 3 weeks later. Didn't matter by then." "You try legal aid?" "Yeah, 11-week intake backlog. They said they couldn't open an emergency file without a permanent address." Of course they did. Luther's jaw was tight now. "What else?" Emmett hesitated. Then, "I heard something. 23 days ago. I was sleeping in a parking structure near the county building. Preston's car was parked below me. I heard him on the phone, clear as anything through the concrete gap." Luther leaned forward. "What did he say?" Emmett closed his eyes. When he spoke, the words came out in the exact rhythm he'd been repeating them for 23 nights. He said, "The Holloway correction gets processed this week. Ridge closes the corridor Thursday." Then he said, 11 years. 11 years and nobody has ever looked at a waitlist correction twice. Then he said, 372,400. Wire it in thirds the same way as Birchwood. And then Emmett stopped, opened his eyes, looked at Luther. Then he said something that I didn't understand. But you do, don't you? Luther's face had gone completely expressionless. What did he say? He said, "The Burnham file from 2009 is closed. It stays closed. There's nothing left to find." The room changed. Diesel, who'd been standing near the sink, turned slowly. Sandstone, who'd been half asleep in a chair near the wall, sat up straight. Rimshot stopped typing. Luther didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at Emmett like the boy had just opened a door that had been locked for 15 years. "You're sure that's what he said?" Luther said, voice very quiet. "The Burnham file. 2009. I'm sure. I remembered it because I didn't have anything to write with. I just repeated it every night. The numbers, the name. I didn't know what it meant. I still don't." Luther stood up, slowly. He walked to the window, looked out at the dark, hands in his pockets, breathing carefully. Nobody spoke. Then Luther's voice, still facing the window. "Spectre, call War Chief. Tell him I need 3 chapters. Tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. County Building parking lot. Luther, tell him it's the Burnham file. He'll understand." Spectre pulled out his phone. Didn't ask questions. Luther turned back to face Emmett. His expression was different now. Not angry. Something colder than that. Something that had been waiting 15 years to surface. "Emmett," he said. "The Burnham file he was talking about? That's my family. 2009, the year I lost everything. My housing, my daughter's custody, my brother's contact information after the county placed him in developmental services and then closed his file without a forwarding address." Emmett stared. "The same year Preston Aldridge started working in the county housing office," Luther continued. "Before he was commissioner, when he was just a mid-level official processing waitlist corrections." The pieces were clicking into place. You could see it happening in Emmett's face. "He's been doing this for 15 years, Emmett whispered. "At least," Luther said. "Probably longer. Your family wasn't the first. Mine wasn't either. And if he's still doing it now," he stopped. His hands came out of his pockets, curled into fists, then released. "Then there are more, a lot more. What are you going to do?" Luther looked at him for a long moment, then at the brothers in the room, then back. "I'm going to do what I should have done 15 years ago when I didn't have the tools or the brothers or the proof. I'm going to find every family he displaced, every file he corrupted, every dollar he stole. And I'm going to make sure that when he goes down so hard there's no appeal, no form letter, no administrative correction." He walked back to the chair, sat down, leaned forward again, elbows on knees. "But first, I need you to tell me everything. Every detail, every number, every word he said on that phone call, because you, Emmett Holloway, just became the witness who's been missing from this case since 2009. Emmett swallowed hard. "I don't have proof. I didn't record it." "You don't need a recording," Luther said quietly. "You have the numbers. 372,400. Wire it in thirds, same way as Birchwood. That's enough to start. That's enough to make Spectre pull county records. That's enough to make Rimshot trace financial transactions. That's enough to make me call in every favor I've got with every brother in 3 chapters." He reached out, took Emmett's unbandaged hand, held it briefly, firmly. The handshake of someone making a deal with a person they considered an equal. You walked 6 miles to bring my daughter home. Now I'm going to walk however many miles it takes to bring justice for yours." Emmett's eyes filled. He blinked hard, looked away. "I don't have a home to bring justice to." "Yeah," Luther said. "You do." He let go of Emmett's hand. Stood, looked at Diesel. "He stays here, 48 hours minimum. Whatever he needs. Food, clothes, medical follow-up. We cover it." "On it," Diesel said. Luther looked at Sandstone. "You sit with him when he wakes up again. Make him comfortable. Get the full story. Record it. I want every detail from the eviction forward." "Understood." Then Luther looked at Rimshot. "You've got until 6 a.m. to pull every county record you can access. Waitlist modifications, financial transactions, anything with Aldridge's name on it, anything with Ridge Development Partners, anything that connects to 2009 and the present day. I don't care if you have to stay up all night." Rimshot grinned. "I was planning to anyway." "Good man." Luther walked to the cot where Lily was sleeping, looked down at her, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. Then he looked back at Emmett. "Get some sleep. When you wake up, we start." "Start what?" Luther's expression was very calm, very certain. "Taking back what was stolen. Not just from you. From everyone." He picked up his vest from the back of the chair, put it on, checked his phone. 3 missed calls, 12 texts, all from brothers in different chapters asking the same question. "You good?" He typed one response, sent it to all of them. "I'm good. 6 a.m. County Building. It's time." Then he pocketed the phone, kissed Lily's forehead one more time, and walked out into the cold. Behind him, Emmett closed his eyes. For the first time in 3 weeks, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, someone was actually going to help. And 6 miles away, in a house on Ridgeview Drive, Preston Aldridge turned off his bedroom light and went to sleep. He had no idea that the phone call he'd made 23 days ago in a parking garage had just been repeated, word for word, by a homeless boy he'd never met. No idea that the file he'd spent 11 years keeping closed had just been ripped wide open. No idea that in 5 hours and 42 minutes, 200 motorcycles would park in perfect formation outside his office. And no idea that the 15-year-old boy whose housing wait list he'd corrected 3 weeks ago was about to become the witness who brought down everything he'd built. But he was about to find out. The rumble started at 5:47 a.m. low at first, distant, like thunder rolling in from 3 different directions at once. Preston Aldridge heard it from his bedroom on Ridgeview Drive. He sat up, listened, frowned. Then he went to the window. The road below was empty. Early morning fog sitting thick in the hollow. Nothing moving, but the sound was getting louder. By 6:02 a.m., the first column appeared. 67 motorcycles. Tight formation. 2 by 2. Engines synchronized in a way that didn't happen by accident. They moved through downtown Welch like a military convoy, disciplined, silent except for the machines, every rider's eyes forward. They parked in the county building lot. 1 row, then another, then another. Engines cutting off in waves until the only sound left was the hiss of cooling metal and the wind moving through the gaps between bikes. By 6:19 a.m., there were 112. By 6:31 a.m., 176. By 6:47 a.m., exactly 200 motorcycles sat in perfect formation across the entire parking lot. 200 bikers stood next to them, not moving, not shouting, not carrying signs, just present. The county building security guard, a man named Morris who'd worked there for 9 years, stood at the front entrance with his phone in his hand, staring. He'd called his supervisor 4 minutes ago. His supervisor had told him to call the police. He'd called the police 3 minutes ago. The police had told him to wait. Because nobody was breaking any law. They were just standing there. At 6:52 a.m., Preston Aldridge's county-issued SUV pulled into the lot. He stopped at the entrance, stared through the windshield at 200 leather vests and 200 pairs of eyes all turning in his direction at once. His hand went to his phone. Then he put it down. Because calling someone would mean admitting he didn't know how to handle this. And Preston Aldridge had spent 23 years building a reputation as a man who could handle anything. He pulled forward. Parked in his reserved spot, the one closest to the building entrance, the one with his name on a small metal sign. He got out, straightened his charcoal wool overcoat, locked the SUV with the key fob. The beep echoed across the silent lot. Then he walked toward the entrance. 200 bikers watched him go. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Luther Burnham stood in the center of the front row, arms crossed, expression neutral, the scar on his jaw catching the early light. Preston's eyes found him as he passed. Recognition flickered, just for a second. Then it was gone. Preston kept walking, up the steps, through the front door, into the building. The door closed behind him. Morris, the security guard, exhaled. "What do I do?" he asked. Quiet. To no one in particular. Luther turned his head slightly. Looked at him. "Nothing," Luther said, voice calm, conversational. "We're not here to cause a problem. We're here to make sure one gets solved. By standing in the parking lot? By being visible when people would rather we weren't." Morris didn't have an answer for that. At 7:08 a.m., the first county employee arrived for work. A woman in her mid-50s. She pulled into the lot, saw the motorcycles, and kept driving. Circled back 5 minutes later. Parked on the street 2 blocks away. Walked in through the side entrance. At 7:14 a.m., 3 more employees did the same. At 7:23 a.m., a reporter from the Welch Daily News showed up with a camera. Luther let him take photos. Answered his questions with 3 sentences. "We're here because the County Housing Assistance Program has failed vulnerable families for over a decade. We have evidence of systematic corruption. We're waiting for someone in that building to do the right thing." The reporter asked for more details. Luther said, "Ask Commissioner Aldridge." Then he turned back to face the building and didn't say another word. By 8 a.m., the story was online. By 8:30 a.m., it had been shared 460 times. By 9 a.m., a news van from Charleston was setting up across the street. Inside the county building, Preston Aldridge sat at his desk on the 2nd floor and watched the parking lot through his office window. 200 bikers. Still there, still silent. His phone rang. County Commissioner Supervisor. Wanted to know what was going on. Preston told him it was a peaceful demonstration. No cause for concern. He was handling it. The supervisor asked if he should call the mayor. Preston said no. That would only escalate things. The supervisor said to keep him updated. Preston said he would. Then he hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. At 9:47 a.m., Luther walked into the building. Just him. No one else. He didn't ask permission. Didn't check in with security. Just walked through the front entrance like he had every right to be there, up the stairs, down the hallway, and stopped at Preston's office door. It was open. Preston was standing near the window, coffee in hand. Looking out at the parking lot, he turned when Luther's shadow crossed the threshold. Their eyes met. "Mr. Burnham," Preston said, Measured voice. Warm, but controlled. It's been a long time. 15 years, Luther said. That's right. 2009. I remember. You had housing issues back then. I'm sorry we couldn't do more to help. You did plenty, Luther said quietly. Just not for me. Preston's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Calculating. Reassessing. I'm not sure I understand. Yeah, Luther said. You do. He stepped into the office. Didn't sit, didn't close the door. Just stood there, 6'2" and 218 pounds of controlled anger in a Hell's Angels vest. I'm here about the wait list corrections, Luther said. The ones you've been processing for the last 15 years. The ones that moved families out of housing assistance slots right before developers closed acquisition deals. Preston's jaw tightened slightly. Just a fraction. Then he smiled. Mr. Burnham, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Administrative corrections are routine. They happen when we discover data entry errors or eligibility discrepancies. There's nothing suspicious about $372,400, Luther said. Preston stopped talking. That's the amount you were paid by Ridge Development Partners over the last 14 months. Wired in 3 installments. Same method you used for Birchwood Corridor in 2019. Same method you used for the South Welch project in 2009 when my family's waitlist position disappeared and my brother ended up in a county developmental facility that closed his file without a forwarding address. Preston's smile faded. Those are serious allegations. Do you have proof? I have a witness who heard you say those exact numbers on a phone call 3 weeks ago. I have a forensic accountant who traced the wire transfers this morning. I have county server logs showing waitlist modifications timed to developer payments, and I have a list of 47 families who lost housing in the last 15 years, all of them in corridors that were later acquired for private development. Luther took a step closer. So yeah, I have proof. Preston set his coffee down carefully. His hands were steady, practiced. The hands of someone who'd talked his way out of harder corners than this. Mr. Burnham, he said. Reasonable voice, patient. I understand you're upset, and I understand why. Losing your family's housing in 2009 was a tragedy. Losing contact with your brother was even worse. But you're drawing connections that don't exist. The county housing system is complex. Sometimes families fall through the cracks despite our best efforts. That doesn't mean there's corruption. It means there's bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, Luther repeated. Flat. Yes. Bureaucracy that earned you $372,000. I don't know where you're getting that number, but you said it, Luther interrupted. 23 days ago, in a parking garage, on a phone call you thought nobody could hear. Preston's expression flickered. Just for a second, the charm slipping. Then it came back. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, a phone conversation overheard out of context isn't evidence, it's hearsay. Not when it's corroborated by financial records. What financial records? Luther pulled out his phone, held it up. Screen showing a spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and transaction codes. These, Luther said. Pulled from county servers at 3:22 this morning by someone who knows how to navigate the system better than whoever you paid to hide them. Preston stared at the screen. His face did something complicated. The smile gone now. The charm offline. What replaced it was something colder. You broke into county servers. No, Luther said. Someone with legitimate access pulled public records that should have been flagged for audit years ago, but somehow never were. Preston's hands curled slightly, then released. Mr. Burnham, he said, voice harder now, less warm. You are holding me in my own office against my will. That is false imprisonment. My attorney will bury your club. I'm standing in an open doorway, Luther said calmly. You're welcome to leave any time. Your attorney is going to have bigger problems in about 6 hours when the FBI shows up, asking why Ridge Development Partners paid you the same week you processed the Holloway waitlist correction. The word FBI landed like a stone in water. Preston went very still. The FBI, he repeated. Yeah, turns out wire fraud across state lines is a federal crime. So is corruption involving federally funded housing programs. And when you've been doing it for 15 years, that's RICO territory. Preston's breathing changed. Faster, shallower. He walked to his desk, sat down, folded his hands on the surface like he was trying to regain control of a room that had already slipped away from him. You don't understand, he said. Quieter now. The county housing program was failing before I ever touched it. Families waiting 2 years, 3 years, no funding, no staff, no solutions. The developers offered a way to clear the backlog, to move things forward, to help people. By moving other people out of the way, Luther said, by making hard choices. Someone has to make hard choices. Luther didn't move, didn't blink. You made $372,000 from hard choices. How much did the families you displaced make? Preston looked away. You don't understand what it's like, he said, voice softer now, almost pleading. I have a daughter in college. Tuition is $63,000 a year. My wife has MS. The treatments aren't covered. The county salary barely keeps us above water. He looked back at Luther, eyes wet now. I worked 30-hour weeks for 20 years trying to help people. And you know what that got me? Burnout, debt, a system that doesn't have the funding to do what it promises. The developers offered a way to actually move things forward, to clear the backlog, to help families get housing faster. His voice cracked slightly. I know what you think of me, but I'm not a monster. I'm just a man who made hard choices in an impossible system. I told myself I was helping more people than I was hurting, that the families I displaced would find other options, that the money was just compensation for the extra work. He leaned forward, hands open, palms up. I have grandchildren now. My daughter just had twins. If I go to prison, I'll never see them grow up. Please. I know I made mistakes, but I'm not evil. I'm just tired. I'm just human. Luther looked at him for a long, long moment. Then, very quietly, just 5 words. I'm not interested in your reasons. The room changed. The appeal died in Preston's throat. No, Luther said again. You did what was easy, and you hid behind bureaucracy so nobody would see it. He leaned forward, hands flat on Preston's desk. Emmett Holloway is 15 years old. 3 weeks ago, you signed off on a correction that moved his family's waitlist position back 200 slots. His mother got sick during the eviction and ended up in county medical. He ended up on the street. For 3 weeks, he slept in parking garages and stairwells, and 2 nights ago, he walked 6 miles through a storm without a jacket because he found a toddler whose father had collapsed, and he didn't know where else to go. Luther's voice was still quiet, but the room felt smaller. That toddler was my daughter. That boy saved her life. And when he woke up, he told me about a phone call he overheard in a parking garage. A call where you said my family's name. The Burnham file from 2009. The file you've spent 15 years keeping closed. Preston's face had gone pale. I'm not interested in your reasons, Luther continued. I'm not interested in your medical bills, or your mortgage, or your daughter's tuition. I'm interested in the 47 families you displaced, the children who ended up in shelters, the parents who lost custody because they lost housing, the siblings who got separated, the files that got closed without forwarding addresses. He straightened. I'm interested in justice. And in about 4 hours, so is the FBI. Preston stared at him. Then, very quietly, I was careful. I was so careful. The mask dropped. Not a strategy, not an appeal. Just the truth slipping out when all the strategies failed. Luther looked at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked toward the door. "Wait," Preston said. Luther stopped. Didn't turn around. "What happens now?" "Now?" Luther's voice was calm. Empty. "Now you call your attorney, and you tell him to clear his schedule for the next 6 months, because the list of charges they're going to file is long." "What charges?" "Wire fraud, bribery, corruption of public office, theft, conspiracy, and depending on what else they find when they dig deeper, RICO." Preston's hands were shaking now. "I can explain." "No," Luther said. "You can't." He walked out. Behind him, Preston Aldridge sat alone in his office, staring at his hands. Downstairs, Luther walked through the lobby, out the front entrance, down the steps. 200 bikers turned to face him. He stopped at the bottom step, looked at them, at Spectre, at War Chief, at brothers from 3 chapters who'd driven through the night because he'd asked. "It's done," Luther said. "He admit it?" Spectre asked. "Close enough? FBI?" "Rimshot made the call at 8 a.m. Agents on the way." Spectre nodded once, satisfied. Luther looked at the parking lot, at the news vans, at the reporter with the camera. "We stay," he said, "until the FBI arrives, until Preston's in custody, until we know for certain this is real." Nobody argued. They just stood there. 200 bikers, watching the building, waiting for justice to catch up. Between 9:47 a.m. and 11:30 a.m., 3 people walked into the county building. Not together. One at a time, each looking for the bikers they'd seen on the news. The first was Dorothy Crane, 71 years old, retired school nurse, had lived on Maple Street for 43 years, the same street where Emmett's mother used to live before the eviction. She found Spectre near the entrance. "I need to tell someone," she said, voice shaking, "about what I saw." Spectre led her to a quiet corner, pulled out his phone, hit record. "Tell me," he said gently. Dorothy's hands twisted in her lap. "I saw the Holloway boy the week of their eviction. He was outside their building, just sitting on the steps, staring at nothing. I knew something was wrong. I'd taught his mother in elementary school 30 years ago. Sweet girl. Didn't deserve what happened." "What did you see?" Spectre asked. "I saw him there 3 times. Once on Tuesday morning when the eviction notice went up. Once on Thursday when the movers came. Once on Saturday when the locks were changed. Each time he looked smaller, like he was disappearing." Her voice broke. "I filed an inquiry with the school district. Asked if anyone was checking on him. Called twice. Nobody answered. Nobody called back." "Why didn't you do more?" Dorothy looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Because I convinced myself someone else would handle it. That the school would notice, that family services would intervene, that I was overreacting." Her hands were shaking now. "I knew something was wrong. I didn't want to be the one who made it worse. And now I know he spent 3 weeks on the street. 3 weeks!" She couldn't finish. Spectre stopped recording, handed her his card. "What you just told me? That's evidence, the pattern of displacement, the lack of follow-up. You're a witness now, not a bystander. A witness." She took the card with trembling fingers. The second witness was Raymond Stokes, 56, former county housing intake coordinator. Had resigned in 2021 after 3 years processing waitlist corrections under Preston's direction. He found Luther in the parking lot. "I worked for him," Raymond said. No preamble. "Preston, I processed the corrections. Not all of them, but enough." "How many?" Luther asked. 11. Over 3 years. Each time he'd bring me a file. Tell me there was a data entry error that needed correcting. Tell me to move the position back in the queue. I'd ask why. He'd say procedural compliance, eligibility discrepancy, administrative review. Raymond's jaw was tight. The first few times I believed him. Then I started noticing the pattern. The families he corrected were always in corridors scheduled for development. Always right before acquisition deals closed. Always displaced within weeks. What did you do? I asked questions. He told me I was overthinking it, that the timing was coincidence, that I should focus on my job and let him handle policy decisions. Raymond looked at the ground. Then one day he brought me a file. Told me to sign off on a correction. I looked at the file. It was a single mother with 2 kids. Stage 4 cancer. They'd been waiting 19 months. I said no, I wouldn't sign it. What happened? He told me to take a week to think about it. Told me my job performance was being reviewed. Told me there were budget cuts coming and I should consider whether I wanted to be seen as a team player. Raymond's voice went flat. I resigned 2 weeks later. Personal reasons. That's what I told everyone. But the real reason was I couldn't look at myself in the mirror anymore, knowing what I was helping him do. Luther held his gaze. You ready to say that on the record? I've been ready for 3 years, Raymond said. I just didn't know who to tell. At 11:34 a.m., a dark sedan pulled into the lot. Federal plates. 2 agents in plain clothes, a man and a woman, mid-40s, exhausted in the way people get when they've been working a case too long without enough evidence. The woman's name was Rivera. The man's was Chen. They walked to where Luther stood. Luther Burnham? Rivera asked. That's me. I'm told you have something relevant to an open federal investigation. Luther looked at her, then at Chen, then back. Depends on what you're investigating. Preston Aldridge, McDowell County Commissioner, suspected housing assistance fraud and developer bribery. We've been building a case for 8 months. Can't get enough to move. Luther's expression didn't change. How long has your office known about him? Rivera's jaw tightened. 8 months. We got a boy off the street in 48 hours. The silence sat heavy between them. We have protocols, Chen said. Defensive. Yeah, Luther said. So do we. Ours just move faster. Rivera's eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue, because she knew he was right. What do you have? She asked instead. Luther pulled out his phone, opened a folder, handed it to her. County server logs showing waitlist modifications. Wire transfer records between Ridge Development Partners and a shell consulting firm registered to Aldridge. Witness testimony from a minor who overheard Aldridge on a phone call confirming the transaction amounts and referencing previous victims. Financial analysis showing a 15-year pattern of displacement timed to developer acquisitions. Rivera scrolled through the files. Her expression shifted. Stopped writing. Leaned forward slightly. This fills a gap we haven't been able to close, she said quietly. Good, Luther said. Because there's more. He gestured to Rimshot, who stepped forward with a laptop. 47 families displaced since 2009, Rimshot said. Cross-referenced with developer acquisition dates. Total estimated fraud, $1.2 million over 15 years. We've got names, dates, dollar amounts, and in 6 cases, direct quotes from families saying they were told the corrections were procedural. Chen took the laptop, scanned the data. Jesus, he said quietly. There's a previous victim, Luther continued. 2009. My younger brother, Dwayne Burnham. He had a developmental disability. When our family was displaced, he was placed in county developmental services. The facility closed in 2010. His file was marked closed in 2011. I haven't been able to locate him since. I believe Aldridge was involved in the placement arrangement that made him disappear from the system. Rivera looked up sharply. You have proof? Circumstantial, but the timing matches. And if you pull his case file from 2009, you'll see the same pattern. Administrative action during housing displacement, no follow-up contact, file closed by a staff member who no longer works for the county. Rivera handed the phone back to Luther. We'll need to interview the witness. His name is Emmett Holloway, 15 years old, 3 weeks on the street. He's the one Aldridge displaced most recently. He's safe now. Staying with us. You want to talk to him? You do it with his consent and with someone he trusts present. Rivera studied Luther's face, then nodded. Fair. One more thing, Luther said. Whatever happens next, Emmett gets a victim advocate assigned before the first interview. Nobody talks to him without him asking first. That's standard procedure. Then it shouldn't be a problem to confirm it. Rivera looked at Chen. Chen nodded. You do right by him, Luther said. Quiet. Firm. Rivera met his eyes. That's the job. Luther held her gaze for another moment, then stepped back. Preston's on the second floor, corner office. He's expecting you. Rivera and Chen walked toward the building. Luther watched them go. Then he turned to the brothers. It's out of our hands now, he said. Systems got it. We did what we came to do. We staying? War Chief asked. Until he's in custody. War Chief nodded. Then we're staying. At 12:08 p.m., Preston Aldridge was escorted out of the county building in handcuffs. He wasn't crying, wasn't shouting, just walking between two federal agents with his head down and his hands cuffed behind his back. He was wearing the same charcoal wool overcoat he'd worn that morning. As they passed the parking lot, he looked up once, saw 200 bikers watching him, saw Luther Burnham in the center of the front row. Their eyes met. Preston looked away first. He asked, once, quietly, if someone could call his neighbor about his mail, as if that were the thing that needed handling. Then he was in the sedan. Door closed. Pulling out of the lot. 200 engines started at once. The rumble rolled across the hollow like thunder answering itself. And then they were gone. What they didn't know yet was that Preston's arrest was only the beginning. Because what Rivera found in that office safe would connect this case to something much older than 15 years. The call came at 2:47 p.m. Luther was back at the clubhouse. Emmett asleep on the cot. Lily playing with blocks on the floor. Coffee going cold on the table. His phone buzzed. Rivera. We've got a problem, she said. No preamble. Luther's hand tightened on the phone. What kind of problem? The kind where one name leads to 5 more. You got time to talk? Yeah, good, because we just opened Aldridge's office safe, and what we found doesn't make sense unless this thing is bigger than one county commissioner stealing from a housing program. Luther set his coffee down slowly. How much bigger? Come to the clubhouse. I'll bring what we've got. This is the kind of conversation that needs to happen off the record first. She hung up. Luther stared at the phone for a long moment. Then he looked at Spector. Call everyone back. War room. 1 hour. By 3:52 p.m., 12 brothers were crammed into the clubhouse back room. Luther, Spector, Diesel, Sandstone, Rimshot, War Chief. 6 others whose road names carried weight in this chapter, and the 2 that had helped this morning. Rivera arrived at 4:03 p.m. Alone. No Chen. No official capacity. She dropped a folder on the table. This doesn't leave this room, she said. Not until we have enough to move officially. Understood, Luther said. Rivera opened the folder. Inside, printed emails, bank statements, a handwritten ledger with dates, names, and dollar amounts going back to 2007. Aldridge kept records, Rivera said. Not digital. Paper. Hidden in a safe behind a fake electrical panel in his office wall. He documented everything. Every family displaced. Every payment received. Every person involved. Why would he do that? Sandstone asked. Insurance, Rivera said. If he ever got caught, he wanted leverage. Proof that he wasn't acting alone. Names to trade. Luther leaned forward, scanned the ledger. His finger stopped on one line. March 17th, 2009/Burnham, L/South Welch Corridor $146,800 /Ridge Development Partners /Placement D. Burnham to County Development Services. Facility 7. His vision tunneled. There it was. Black ink on yellowed paper. The day his family lost everything. The amount paid. The name of the company. And the note about Dwayne's placement. Facility 7. He'd never heard that designation before. What's Facility 7? He asked. Voice very quiet. Rivera flipped through the ledger. Found another reference. Then another. It appears 16 times. Always in connection with a displacement. Always a vulnerable family member. Always someone with a disability or medical need. A county facility? We don't think so. The County Developmental Services System only had 3 official facilities in 2009. None of them were designated by number. Rimshot was already typing. Checking county contracts from 2009, he said. Cross-referencing Facility 7 and Developmental Services. 30 seconds of silence. Just the sound of keys clicking. And the growing sense that whatever he was about to find would change the scope of everything they thought they knew. Then Rimshot stopped. Got something. 2008. County signed a 5-year contract with a private care provider called Appalachian Community Support Services. Contract included housing for up to 40 adults with developmental disabilities. The contract designated their locations as Facilities 1 through 8. Where's Facility 7? Luther asked. More typing. Birchwood Corridor. The same area Aldridge cleared for development in 2019. The room went very quiet. Let me guess, Spector said. The facility closed before the development deal went through. 2010, Rimshot confirmed. Contract terminated early, county cited budget constraints. Where did the residents go? Luther asked. Rimshot's face went pale as he read. Files were transferred to Independent Living Services. No forwarding addresses listed. Oversight transferred to a county social worker who... He stopped. Scrolled. Who resigned 6 months later. Personal reasons. Luther stood up. Walked to the window. Stared out at the hollow. His brother had been in Facility 7 when it closed. His brother's file said he'd been transferred to Independent Living, but there was no record of where. No forwarding address. No follow-up. Just a closed file and a system that had moved on. How many people were in Facility 7 when it closed? He asked. Not turning around. 19, Rimshot said quietly. How many have documented follow-up records? Silence. Then, 3. Luther's hands curled into fists against the windowsill. 16 people, he said, voice flat, controlled. 16 vulnerable adults with disabilities. Gone. No records, no oversight. Just gone. We don't know they're gone, Rivera said carefully. We just know the records are incomplete. Luther turned around. Yeah, he said. We do. He looked at Rivera. Aldridge didn't just steal housing slots. He disappeared people who were inconvenient to the development process, people who couldn't advocate for themselves, people whose families had just been displaced and didn't have the stability to fight back. That's a serious allegation, Rivera said. So prove me wrong, Luther said. Pull every file from Facility 7. Track down every person who was listed as transferred to independent living. Find them. Interview them. And when you can't find most of them, tell me I'm wrong." Rivera looked at the ledger again. "If you're right," she said slowly, "this isn't housing fraud. This is human trafficking. Exploitation of vulnerable adults. Conspiracy across multiple agencies. And if I'm right," Luther said, "my brother is one of 16 people who've been missing for 15 years while a county commissioner collected payments and closed files." Nobody spoke. Then War Chief's voice, low and steady. "What do you need?" Luther looked at him. "I need a list of every family displaced between 2007 and now. I need interviews with anyone who remembers Facility 7. I need the name of the social worker who resigned, and I need to know who else was involved in closing those files." "We can get that," War Chief said. Luther looked at Rivera. "How long until you can move officially?" 48 hours. Maybe less if the evidence holds up." "Make it less," Luther said. "Because if there are people still being exploited through this system, every hour we wait is another hour they're in danger." Rivera nodded once. Closed the folder. "I'll be in touch." She left. The brothers sat in silence. Then Rimshot spoke. "There's more." Everyone looked at him. He turned his laptop around. On screen, a wire transfer record, dated 3 days ago. Origin, Ridge Development Partners, LLC. Destination, Aldridge Consulting. Amount, $89,200. Reference, Final Corridor Acquisition, Ironbark Hollow. "Ironbark Hollow," Sandstone said. "That's where Emmett lived," Luther finished. 2318 Ironbark Hollow, the address he gave when he first woke up. Spectre leaned forward. "He paid $89,000 to clear Emmett's family out 3 weeks ago. And he's been doing it for 15 years, Diesel added. Luther looked at the screen for a long time. Then he said, very quietly, 47 families, 16 missing people, $1.2 million. And for 15 years, a system designed to catch exactly this evil looked the other way. He stood, walked to where Emmett was sleeping. The boy's face was peaceful, the frostbite hand still wrapped, resting on his chest. Luther watched him for a moment. Then he walked back to the table. "We find them all," he said. "Every family, every missing person, every piece of evidence. And we make sure that when this case goes to trial, there's no deal, no plea, no administrative correction that makes this go away." "How?" Sandstone asked. Luther smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "We do what we've always done. We knock on doors, we listen, we document, and we make the system work the way it was supposed to work from the beginning." He looked around the room. "Spectre, you find the social worker who resigned. Find out what she knows." "On it." "Rimshot, you pull every county record you can access on Facility 7, resident names, transfer dates, any documentation of follow-up care." "Got it." "Diesel and Sandstone, you start interviewing families, the 47 on the list. Find out who remembers what, who saw signs, who tried to help." They nodded. "War Chief." Luther stopped, met the older man's eyes. I need you to help me find Dwayne." War Chief stood slowly. 15 years is a long time, brother. "I know. You sure you're ready for what we might find?" Luther's jaw tightened. "No, but I'm going to look anyway." War Chief crossed the room, put one large hand on Luther's shoulder. Then we looked together. By 11:47 p.m. that night, they had names. Spectre found the social worker. Her name was Teresa Moss. She lived in Bluefield now. Hadn't worked in social services since 2010. When he called, she cried for 6 minutes before she could talk. She remembered Facility 7. She remembered the closures. She remembered being told to mark the files transferred and close them. She remembered asking where the residents had gone. She remembered being told it wasn't her concern. She gave Spectre the names of 3 other county workers who'd resigned around the same time. All 3 for personal reasons. All 3 had refused to talk about why. Rimshot pulled the Facility 7 records. 19 residents in 2009. 16 marked transferred to independent living. 3 marked family placement. Of the 16 transferred, 0 documented follow-up visits, 0 current addresses, 0 phone contacts, just closed files and a system that had moved on. Diesel and Sandstone interviewed 6 families by phone. All 6 remembered being displaced. All 6 remembered being told it was procedural. 4 remembered seeing Preston Aldridge at community events afterward, shaking hands, smiling, acting like he'd tried to help. One woman, Dorothy Crane, 71, retired school nurse, remembered Emmett. "I taught his mother in elementary school," she said, voice shaking. "I saw that boy the week of the eviction. He looked lost. I filed an inquiry with the school. Nobody answered. I called twice. Nothing. I didn't know he'd ended up on the street. If I'd known—" She couldn't finish. Sandstone told her it wasn't her fault. She didn't believe him. And Luther sat at the table with Dwayne's file in front of him. The file he'd requested through FOIA twice. The file that had come back redacted. The sections redacted. Placement destination. Signing official. Follow-up care. All the things that mattered. He stared at his brother's photo. 19 years old. Smiling. Holding a drawing he'd made of a house and a tree. The same drawing Luther had tattooed on his forearm 18 years ago. "We're going to find you," Luther whispered. "I don't care how long it takes." His phone buzzed. Rivera. Message: FBI opened full investigation. RICO charges filed. Aldridge arraigned tomorrow 9 a.m. Press conference 2 p.m. You should be there. Luther typed back, "I'll be there. But this isn't over until we find the 16. Her response came fast. "Agreed. We're working it. I'll keep you updated." Luther set the phone down, looked around the room at his brothers. "It's happening," he said. "Federal case. RICO charges. Aldridge arraigned tomorrow morning." "Bail?" Spectre asked. "Denied," Luther said, reading another message. "Flight risk. Severity of charges. They're holding him." Rimshot whistled low. "Hell of a day's work." "It's not done," Luther said quietly. "Not until we find everyone he disappeared." He looked at Emmett, still sleeping on the cot. "That boy walked 6 miles to bring my daughter home. Now we're going to walk however far it takes to bring everyone else home too." Nobody argued. Because that's what they did. That's what they'd always done. And 48 hours after a homeless 15-year-old collapsed at their door in a storm, the Hells Angels had just opened a federal investigation that would bring down a 15-year pattern of institutional corruption. Justice had been served. But justice wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning. The hard part was over. Or so they thought. Because what came next, the logistics of rebuilding a life that had been torn apart, would prove to be just as challenging as bringing down the man who'd destroyed it. Just in a different way. 3 days after Preston Aldridge's arraignment, Diesel drove Emmett to McDowell County General for a follow-up appointment. Same hospital where Luther had collapsed. Same entrance where Emmett had found Lily. Different reason for being there. This time, someone was making sure he got the care he needed. They sat in the waiting room. Diesel had brought a package of crackers and a bottle of water. Set them on the chair between them without saying anything. Emmett looked at them for a moment, then picked up the crackers. Ate them slowly. Nobody rushed him. Nobody took them away. Diesel pretended to read a magazine about motorcycles he'd already read twice. "Emmett Holloway?" A nurse called from the doorway. They both stood. The examination took 22 minutes. The doctor, a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and efficient hands, unwrapped Emmett's left hand carefully, studied the fingers, pressed gently along each one, had him make a fist, then spread his fingers wide. "Full range of motion," she said. "No tissue death, no nerve damage. You got very lucky." "Diesel got me warm fast enough," Emmett said. "Diesel did excellent work," the doctor agreed. She looked at him through the doorway where he was waiting. "But you're the one who walked 6 miles in the cold. That took something most people don't have." Emmett didn't know what to say to that. The doctor wrapped his hand in a lighter bandage, gave him instructions for care, told him to come back in 2 weeks. Then she said something that made Emmett's throat tighten. "Thank you for getting her to safety. Lily, I heard what you did." Emmett blinked hard, looked at the floor. "I just walked." "You did more than that," the doctor said quietly. "And because you did, a little girl still has her father. That matters." When they got back to the truck, Diesel didn't start the engine right away. Just sat there, hands on the wheel. "You hungry?" he asked. "Yeah." "Good, because Sandstone's making chili, and if we don't get back soon, Rimshot's going to eat all the cornbread." Emmett almost smiled. Almost. The clubhouse smelled like chili and cornbread and coffee. The same smell it had 3 nights ago when Emmett collapsed at the door. But this time, he was walking in under his own power. Coat that actually fit him. One of the brothers had dropped it off yesterday. Boots that were the right size. War Chief's doing. The table was set. 8 brothers. Lily in a high chair next to Luther. Emmett's spot already waiting. Nobody made a speech. Nobody said this was symbolic. They just ate. Emmett took a bowl, filled it, sat down. For the first time in 3 weeks, he ate without watching the door, without calculating how fast he'd need to move if someone tried to take the food away. Without the timer in his head counting down to when the meal would end, he just ate. Across the table, Luther watched him. Didn't say anything, just watched. Halfway through the second bowl, Emmett's shoulders dropped. The tension that had been living there since the eviction finally letting go. Diesel noticed. Caught Luther's eye. Nodded once. The sound of spoons on bowls. Low conversation. Lily babbling something about more bread in her high chair. The refrigerator humming in the corner, the same refrigerator that had hummed 3 nights ago. But now the sound meant something different. It meant home. Or at least the beginning of one. On day 6, Luther drove Emmett to an address on Maple Street. Small house, 2 bedrooms. Porch that needed fixing but was structurally sound. Yard with a fence that kept nothing in but marked the boundaries anyway. A woman stood on the porch. Late 40s. Kind face. Emmett's maternal aunt, Nadine Holloway. She'd driven from Charleston the day after Luther called her. She'd been looking for Emmett for 19 days. Now he was standing in her driveway. She came down the steps slowly, like she was afraid sudden movement would make him disappear. "Emmett," she said. "Aunt Nadine." They stared at each other for a long moment. Then she pulled him into a hug that lasted 15 seconds and felt like it was making up for 19 days of not knowing where he was. When she let go, her eyes were wet. "Your mother's been asking about you," she said. "Every day. County finally let me talk to her yesterday. She knows you're safe. She knows you're with people who care about you." Emmett's voice came out rough. "Can I see her?" "Next week. Doctor says she's stable enough for visits. We'll go together." Luther stepped forward, held out his hand. "Ms. Holloway, I'm Luther Burnham, president of the local Hells Angels chapter." Nadine shook his hand. Firm grip, Direct eye contact. I know who you are. The FBI agent called me. Told me what you did. What your club did. She paused. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. You don't owe us thanks, Luther said. Your nephew saved my daughter's life. We're just making sure he has a safe place to land. The agent said you raised money. Luther nodded, pulled an envelope from his vest, handed it to her. $14,800. Chapter fundraiser. Contributions from brothers in 3 counties. It's earmarked for Emmett's care. Housing, medical, school supplies. Whatever he needs. Nadine stared at the envelope like it was made of something fragile. I can't. It's not a loan, Luther said gently. It's not charity. It's a debt paid. Emmett walked 6 miles to bring Lily home. This is us making sure he has a home to come back to. Nadine's hands shook slightly as she took the envelope. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of him, Luther said. That's all we need to hear. I will, I promise. Luther looked at Emmett. You good with this? Emmett looked at the house, at his aunt, at the porch with the door that was already open. Yeah, he said quietly. I'm good. Luther reached out, shook Emmett's hand, the same way he had 3 nights ago in the clubhouse, the handshake of equals. You call if you need anything, Luther said. You hear me? Anything. Day or night. You've got family now. Blood and chosen both. Emmett nodded. Couldn't speak. Luther pulled a card from his pocket, handed it to Nadine. My number, Diesel's number, Spector's number. Any problems? Housing, legal, medical? You call. We'll handle it. Thank you, Nadine said again. Luther nodded once, then he walked back to his truck. Before he got in, he turned. Emmett? The boy looked up. You did good, kid. Real good. Don't forget that. Then he was in the truck, engine turning over, pulling away. Emmett stood in the driveway and watched until the motorcycle was out of sight. Then he turned to his aunt. She was smiling, crying and smiling at the same time. Come on, she said. Let me show you your room. Inside, the house was warm, clean, safe. The room she showed him had a bed, a desk, a window that looked out on the backyard. Emmett stood in the doorway for a long time. Is this really mine? He asked. For as long as you need it, Nadine said. Emmett walked to the bed, sat down carefully. The mattress didn't sag. The blankets didn't smell like rain or concrete. He looked at his aunt. I haven't had a bed in 3 weeks. I know, sweetheart. I know. She sat down next to him. Didn't touch him. Just sat there. You're safe now, she said. You hear me? You're safe. And we're going to figure out the rest together. Emmett nodded. For the first time in 3 weeks, he believed it. 2 days later, the brothers came to say goodbye. Not forever, just transitioning. Sandstone arrived first. Crouched down so he was at Emmett's eye level on the porch. You settling in okay? Yeah. Good. That's good. Sandstone pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. Phone number written in careful print. This is my number. You call me if you need to talk. About anything. School. Nightmares. Whatever. I spent 10 years working with kids your age. I know what it's like when the system fails you. You're not going through that alone anymore. He pressed the paper into Emmett's hand. I mean it. Anytime. Okay, Emmett said. Sandstone straightened. Ruffled Emmett's hair once, gentle, the way you'd touch something you didn't want to break. Then he left. Rimshot showed up an hour later. Younger. More energy. Grinned when Emmett opened the door. Brought you something, he said. Handed over a laptop. Refurbished, but solid. It's got everything you need for school. Homework, research. There's also a folder on the desktop labeled Important Stuff. Legal documents, housing records. Everything related to your case. You're old enough to know what happened. Old enough to see the proof. If you want to read it, it's there. If you don't, delete it. Your choice. Emmett took the laptop carefully. Why are you giving me this? Because you deserve to know the truth, Rimshot said. And because knowledge is power. Preston Aldridge took a lot from you, but he doesn't get to control the story. You do. He pulled out his phone, showed Emmett his contact. I'm good with computers. You need help with anything. Tech, research, tracking down records. You text me. I got you. Thanks, Emmett said. Rimshot knocked his fist gently against Emmett's shoulder. You're a good kid. Don't let what happened make you think otherwise. Then, he was gone. Diesel came last, brought a first aid kit and a handwritten note with care instructions for the frostbite recovery. Hand's looking good, he said. Keep it warm for another week. Any numbness or pain, you call me immediately. I mean it. I will. Diesel stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable in the way people do when they're trying to say something important. Listen, he said finally. I've seen a lot of bad situations. Combat, emergency medicine, things that should have killed people but didn't. And you know what makes the difference? Emmett shook his head. People who show up when it matters. You showed up for Lily when she needed you. We showed up for you. That's how this works. You don't go through the hard stuff alone if you don't have to. He pulled out a card. Same as Luther's. Contact numbers. You're part of the family now. Not official, not patched. But family anyway. That means something to us. It should mean something to you too. Emmett took the card. It does. Diesel nodded, satisfied. Then he left. And Emmett stood on the porch with 3 phone numbers, a laptop, and the first real proof he'd had in 3 weeks that maybe the world wasn't completely broken. Maybe it was just cracked. And maybe there were people who knew how to fix the cracks if you let them. But this story isn't really about housing fraud or corrupt officials, or even a homeless boy walking through a storm. It's about what happens when the system designed to protect people becomes the thing they need protection from. It's about the moment you realize that the scariest-looking person in the room might be the only one who sees you as human. And it's about the choice, the one we all have to make at some point, to keep walking even when you don't know where you're going. Because Emmett didn't know where he was going when he picked up Lily on those hospital steps. He just knew he couldn't leave her there. And that one decision, made by a 15-year-old boy with no home and no resources and no reason to believe anyone would help him, changed everything. 11 days after Preston Aldridge's arraignment, Luther stopped by Nadine's house unannounced. Not for a meeting, not for an update, just to check. He found Emmett in the backyard, sitting on the porch steps, doing homework, normal teenage thing. The kind of thing that shouldn't feel miraculous, but did. Luther didn't say anything, just sat down on the step next to him. They sat in silence for a while. Then Emmett spoke. They found 3 of them. Luther didn't need to ask what he meant. 3 of the 16 from Facility 7? Yeah, FBI called yesterday. 3 people tracked down and safe, living in group homes in Virginia and Kentucky. They'd been placed there after the facility closed, but the paperwork got lost. They're okay. That's good, Luther said quietly. 13 still missing. I know. Emmett set down his pencil, stared at his homework without seeing it. What if we don't find them all? Luther was quiet for a long time. Then we keep looking, he said finally. For as long as it takes. And we make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." Emmett nodded. Luther reached into his vest, pulled out the birthday card, the one from Lily's pocket. Daddy's Angels. The ink still run, bleeding in blue rivers across the cardboard. "I'm keeping this," Luther said, "framing it, putting it next to a photo I've carried for 18 years, the photo of a daughter I lost custody of in 2009 and haven't seen since." He looked at Emmett. "I don't know if I'll ever find Reese, or Dwayne, but I know I found you, and you found Lily, and sometimes that has to be enough to keep going." Emmett's eyes were wet. "I'm sorry you lost them. I'm sorry you lost your home." They sat with that for a moment. Then Luther stood, brushed off his jeans. "You doing okay here?" "Yeah. Aunt Nadine's good. She listens." "Good, that's good." Luther walked toward his bike, stopped, looked back. "Emmett? Yeah? You ever need anything, and I mean anything, you call. You hear me?" "I hear you." Luther nodded once, got on his bike. The engine rumbled to life. He pulled out onto the road and didn't look back. Behind him, Emmett picked up his pencil and went back to his homework. The afternoon light was warm. The yard was quiet. And for the first time since the eviction, the future felt like something he could see. 18 months later, Emmett stood in the McDowell County Courthouse lobby, waiting for his name to be called. He was wearing a button-down shirt Nadine had helped him pick out. School shoes that were only slightly uncomfortable. A folder in his hands containing a statement he'd written and rewritten 6 times. Next to him, Nadine, Luther, Diesel, Sandstone. The federal trial had taken 9 months. Preston Aldridge had been convicted on 14 counts: wire fraud, bribery, corruption of public office, conspiracy, and 10 counts of exploitation of vulnerable adults. The sentencing hearing was today. Emmett had been asked if he wanted to give a victim impact statement. He'd said yes. "Emmett Holloway?" the bailiff called from the courtroom door. He stood. His hands were shaking. Luther's hand landed on his shoulder. Steady. Firm. "You got this," Luther said quietly. Emmett nodded. What he didn't know yet was that his testimony would be the turning point. Not just in the trial, but in his own understanding of what justice actually meant. Walked into the courtroom. Preston Aldridge sat at the defense table. Orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed. He didn't look at Emmett when the boy walked past. Emmett walked to the podium, set his folder down, looked at the judge. "Your Honor, my name is Emmett Holloway. I'm 16 years old. 17 months ago, Preston Aldridge signed off on an administrative correction that moved my family's housing waitlist position back 200 slots. We lost our apartment. My mother got sick and ended up in county medical care. I ended up on the street." His voice was steady, practiced. He'd rehearsed this. "For 3 weeks, I slept in parking garages and stairwells. I went hungry. I got hurt. I learned what it feels like to be invisible, to ask for help and be told no, to watch people look at me and decide I wasn't worth their time." He paused, looked at his notes, then decided he didn't need them. "I'm not here to tell you what sentence he deserves. That's not my job. I'm here to tell you what he took. He took my home. He took my mother's health. He took my belief that the system was designed to help people like me." Emmett's hands tightened on the podium edge. "But he didn't take everything. Because one night, I found a little girl whose father had collapsed. And I walked 6 miles through a storm because she kept saying, 'Daddy's Angels,' and I didn't know what else to do. And that walk led me to people who proved that sometimes the system fails, but people don't." He looked at Luther in the gallery. Luther nodded once. Preston Aldridge displaced 47 families over 15 years. He caused 16 vulnerable adults to disappear from county records. He stole over $1 million, and he did it all while pretending to be a community leader, while shaking hands and smiling and acting like he cared. Emmett's voice got quieter. I hope you give him the maximum sentence, not because I'm angry, though I am, but because there are 13 people still missing, and every year he spends in prison is a year the FBI has to find them and make sure this never happens again. He picked up his folder, stepped back from the podium. Thank you, Your Honor. He walked back to his seat. Nadine's hand found his, squeezed once. The judge looked at Preston Aldridge. Mr. Aldridge, do you have anything you'd like to say before I pronounce sentence? Preston stood. Slowly. He looked thinner than he had at arraignment. Older. Your Honor, I take full responsibility for my actions. I made terrible choices. I hurt people. I'm sorry. The words were hollow. Everyone in that room could hear it. The judge looked at him for a long time. Then she spoke. Preston Aldridge, you held a position of public trust. You were supposed to protect vulnerable families. Instead, you exploited them. You turned public housing assistance into private profit. You caused immeasurable harm to people who had no power to fight back. She paused. On count 1, wire fraud, 14 years. On count 2, bribery, 11 years. On counts 3 through 12, exploitation of vulnerable adults, 6 years each, to run consecutively. Total sentence, 85 years in federal prison. Parole eligibility after 51 years. Preston's face went white. The courtroom was silent. Additionally, the judge continued, you are ordered to pay full restitution to all identified victims. Your assets will be liquidated to satisfy this debt, and you will cooperate fully with ongoing federal investigations into the whereabouts of the 13 individuals still missing from Facility 7 records. She looked at Emmett. Mr. Holloway, thank you for your courage in coming forward. Your testimony was instrumental in this conviction. Emmett nodded. Couldn't speak. The gavel came down. Court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Emmett stood on the steps and breathed. Luther stood next to him. Didn't say anything. Just stood there. After a while, Emmett spoke. 85 years? Yeah. He'll die in prison. Yeah. Emmett was quiet for another moment. Good. Luther almost smiled. Come on, he said. Let's go home. 6 years later, Emmett walked into the McDowell County Housing Assistance Office. He was 22 now, college graduate, social work degree. First day on the job as an intake coordinator. The same office where he'd come at 15, desperate and ignored. The same desk where a caseworker had refused to make eye contact. Now he sat behind that desk. His first client was a woman, late 30s, 2 kids, eviction notice in hand. She looked exhausted. Looked like she'd been fighting too long with too little. Looked like she expected to be told no. Emmett recognized the look. He'd worn it for 3 weeks when he was 15. Ms. Torres, he said. She looked up, eyes wary. That's me. I'm Emmett Holloway. I'm your intake coordinator. I'm here to help you find housing. She stared at him. That's it? No wait list? No forms? There's paperwork, Emmett said gently. But we're going to fill it out together. And I'm going to make sure you're placed as quickly as possible. The system's been reformed. New oversight, new protocols, new people running it. He leaned forward slightly. I'm not going to lie to you. It's still slow, it's still complicated, but it's not corrupt anymore. And I promise you, I will fight for your family the same way someone fought for mine. Ms. Torres's eyes filled. Thank you, she whispered. Emmett nodded. Let's get started. That night, Emmett drove to the clubhouse. Still standing, still full of brothers, still smelling like motor oil and coffee. Luther was there. Older now, gray in his beard, but still president, still steady. Lily was there too. 8 years old, doing homework at the same table where Emmett had eaten his first safe meal 6 years ago. How was the first day? Luther asked. Hard, Emmett said honestly. Saw a lot of families who reminded me of mine. You help them? I'm going to try. Good, Luther said. That's all anyone can do. Emmett sat down. Lily looked up from her homework. Emmett, guess what? What? I got an A on my science test. That's great, Lily, she beamed, went back to her homework. Emmett watched her for a moment. The same little girl who'd said Daddy's angels in a storm 6 years ago. The same girl who'd somehow known where the angels lived when Emmett didn't. Luther caught him looking. You thinking about that night? Yeah. Me too, Luther said quietly. Every day. They sat in comfortable silence. Then Luther stood, walked to a frame on the wall. The birthday card. Daddy's angels. The ink still run. Next to a photo of a young girl, Reese, age 4. Never found her, Luther said, voice even, controlled. Reese, or Dwayne, FBI's still looking. 7 of the 13 from Facility 7 are still missing. But we found 6 people who were lost for over a decade, now safe. He turned back to Emmett, and we changed the system so it can't happen again. That has to count for something. Emmett stood, walked over to stand next to Luther. It counts for everything, he said. Luther put his hand on Emmett's shoulder. You did good, kid. Real good. You took what happened to you and turned it into something that helps people. That's the hardest thing there is. I learned from the best, Emmett said. Luther smiled. A real one. Yeah, you did. Luther stood outside the clubhouse that night after everyone had gone home, leaned against his bike, looked up at the stars. His phone buzzed. Message from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Burnham, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm a social worker in Oregon. I just found your brother, Dwayne. He's safe. He's been in a care facility here since 2011. The records were misfiled. He asks about you every day. He remembers you. Would you like to talk to him? Luther stared at the message for a long time. His hands shook. Then he typed, Yes, God, yes. The response came fast. Calling now. The phone rang. Luther answered. Luther? A voice, familiar, older, but the same. Dwayne? Luther, I knew you'd find me. I knew you'd keep looking. Luther's vision blurred. I did. I'm sorry it took so long. It's okay. You found me. That's what matters. They talked for 37 minutes. About nothing. About everything. About the 15 years that had been stolen. About the future that was still possible. When the call ended, Luther sat on the ground with his back against the clubhouse wall and cried. Not from grief, from relief. From the understanding that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the story doesn't end the way you think it will. Sometimes it ends better. He looked at the stars for a long time. Then he stood. Got on his bike, rode home to Lily. Tomorrow he'd start making arrangements to bring Dwayne home. Tonight he just breathed. And let himself believe that after 15 years of questions, he finally had an answer. This story was never about bikers or patches or leather vests. It was about what happens when you refuse to look away from someone who needs help. If you've ever seen someone struggling and convinced yourself it wasn't your problem, listen to me. It is your problem. Because we're all connected. We're all one bad month, one medical bill, one administrative correction away from needing help ourselves. And the only thing standing between a functioning society and complete collapse is people who choose to care when they don't have to. So pay attention. Listen when someone hesitates before answering, "I'm fine." Notice when a kid shows up to school in the same clothes 3 days in a row. Ask questions when something doesn't feel right. And if you can't help directly, call someone who can. Because Emmett walked 6 miles in a storm because a 2-year-old girl kept saying 3 words. Daddy's angels. And those angels showed up. Not because they had to, because they chose to. If this story moved you, subscribe to Gentle Biker Official. Comment below and tell me, have you ever been helped by a stranger when you needed it most? Or have you been the stranger who helped someone else? I want to hear your stories. And share this video with someone who needs to remember that there are still good people in the world who show up when it matters. The birthday card still hangs in Luther's clubhouse, the ink still bleeding across the cardboard in blue rivers. But now, when Lily sees it, she doesn't just see words. She sees proof that angels exist. They just wear leather vests and ride motorcycles. And 6 years ago, on a night when the storm was the worst the Hollow had seen all winter, one 15-year-old boy who had nothing left decided to trust 3 words spoken by a child who somehow knew exactly where to go. Emmett stood at that clubhouse door, soaked, freezing, frost-bitten, and desperate, holding a toddler he'd carried for 6 miles through hell. And when the door opened, he found exactly what Lily promised. Angels. The kind that don't ask questions first. The kind that just help